Hello and welcome to Full-Time Live on a Fulhamish. I should probably change the score. I've done it again by not changing the scores. But yeah, this is Full-Time Live on a Fulhamish YouTube channel, Twitter account and Facebook page. A late sucker punch has caused most of the Fulham fan base to be absolute distraught and will ruin the entire weekend until we see that Burnley have gotten the 3 points against Newcastle United. Why have I just need to just start hitting the right button on my keyboard here. But no, it's absolutely devastating. I mean, it was an absolutely terrible game. I won't lie. I thought it was, me and my mates always talk about. There's this one. I think it was the Aston Villa Stoke game that everyone always talks about being so bad on Boxing Day back in 2012. But that rivaled it. If it wasn't for the late goal and the offside decision, not really too much came out of it. Obviously, the thing that everyone's going to be talking about now is the league done? Are we fully relegated? But people are we looking forward to, what team's going to win the playoffs? Can we get Blackpool away on the opening weekend of the season, which would be quite nice. But I still do think it's not completely over. But again, we just didn't scoring a goal. But before I start rambling on and just completely pile on everything that's high on my chest, joining me on Full-Time Live today is Lydia Campbell.
Hi guys, that's as grim as it is.
And Izzy Barker.
Thanks for having me, Dom.
As always, it's always a pleasure, even when we Fulham fans just don't want to talk about anything but the game. But I mean, we shortly discussed this previously before we came on live. I don't think that's the most gutting. I know Izzy will disagree, but I don't think that's the most gutted I've been after a Fulham game this season because we were so abjectly bad going forward today. Realistically, I think for me, the Josh Maja Lamina incident against Spurs, for me, was a more gutting incident just because we deserved something out of that game. Whereas today, on the balance of play, I know 0-0 probably been a fair result because it was such a poor game. But Iz, you disagree? You think this is the most gutting it's come to this season?
Yeah, I can't even fully remember the goal that well because I had this overriding sense to afterwards. I honestly felt like I was gonna cry and throw something. It was just so painful, and I felt like my psychic senses were tingling. I felt like Traore hasn't had a good season, particularly it's been very up and down, and I just had this feeling he would score against us. I just knew he would, and it's classic Fulham, isn't it? And for me, it's we've been very unlucky and that has let us down at times, poor decisions or, Maja's goal and Newcastle, the penalty. But recently we just haven't been playing well. That's the worrying thing for me. We just haven't been playing good enough to stay in this league, and we haven't taken chance time and time again to claw our way out of the relegation zone.
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously, there was the 2 wins in a week when we beat Sheffield United and we beat Everton, and we clawed ourselves straight back into it because at that point, if we didn't pick up 6 points in those games, we could have been completely out of it. But Lydia, when it comes to looking for the last 6 games of the season, we know obviously if Newcastle end up losing to Burnley tomorrow, they've got to go to Turf Moor, then it's still the same situation as it was before. But I mean, the overriding feeling and factor from today's game was we do not look like scoring a goal.
No, not at all. I mean, even the goal we got against Villa last week was handed to us on a plate. Let's be honest, that we didn't make that goal ourselves. Mitchell finished it well, but I mean, it wasn't because we played well. It wasn't because we set up a lovely cross. It wasn't, and it's so frustrating to see a team with apparently so much attacking talent just looks so abysmal, and that it's so frustrating. I don't really know what the game plan was tonight, I'll be honest. I can't
there wasn't one as far as I'm concerned.
No, it's just
right.
I agree.
The game plan worked until you got past the defence. Then as soon as you got past the defence, there didn't seem to be one. I mean, I understand reading Lamina playing like that works if you're playing a 4-2-3-1. It doesn't work if you're playing a sort of 5-2-1-2 kind of formation. I thought defensively today, apart from the goal, we weren't too bad. What was weird is for some reason the only players who could actually pass the ball for Fulham today were our centre backs. No one else decided they had any footballing ability when it came to passing whatsoever. I mean, Lydia were talking about before you sort of came into the so-called green room on online here that You know, the only cross that we really connected with today was the Ruben Loftus-Cheek header in the first half. If you were trying to explain to someone is what our game plan was today, what would you try and say?
Well, in the first half, I did see this tiny glimmer of possibly we were trying to, instead of playing, you know, Scott Parker's pretty pass it to death football right out from the back, pass it to death. I think we were trying to use that kind of Anderson crossfield pass to Robinson to maybe link up with Mitro. And at times you could see Mitro was maybe trying to drift out of the box, and he'd obviously been told to stay in the box. It's going to be Anderson to Robinson, but yeah, it just didn't work. Robinson did grow into the game, but his footwork and his reaction time, he'd just kind of scuff it up every time in the first half. And yeah, and then every man and his dog came onto the pitch, and about 50 notes were on the pitch, and who knows what was going on then. Half our players, I'm not sure, can speak English anyway, so I'm trying to work out what language the notes are in as well. Like, it was just a shambles at the end, but that kind of just epitomizes Fulham at this minute in time in the season, doesn't it?
Obviously, if we look at we go back to the beginning, look at when a team lineup was announced. Obviously, a few people had a few raised eyebrows. Obviously, Tosin has been benched for the first time in what it seems pretty much since he joined the club. It feels to me he's pretty much played pretty much every league game since he's joined. And obviously, Terence Kongola came in, who I thought had a good game today. I thought, to be honest, he was probably one of our better players. I'm being perfectly frank. You know, he was passing the ball well. He played some good passes, put some good tackles in. I think he's definitely a defender who only sort of works in maybe a back five as opposed to a back four. But obviously he came in, and obviously we saw Anthony Robinson came in, who hasn't been there in recent games, and we've gone to a back four. We've seen obviously Olareina playing in the left back position. But when you saw the lineup, did you think there was enough in that team to get the 3 points today?
Well, I mean, I did, in the sense that we'll have Mitrovic there, we'll have Bobby Reid there, who's our top goal scorer. You know, in those sense, and we also the players who came out, you know, as you say, Tosin came out. It was a bit of a odd decision. You know, it seemed an odd decision. I don't think it was a bad decision at all. As you say, I think Kongolo came in and played really well. But what I think is that we seem to not be very well gelled. So we seem to be good in aspects of the pitch, but not everywhere, and not in the clinical places. Now, if we look at the Wolves goal, for example, I mean, it was just it was a freak finish. Like, let's be honest. I mean, he probably had no right to score from there. So it wasn't down to like bad defending. I think we probably did have enough to win the game in terms of the talent on the pitch. I don't think we had enough in terms of how we approached the game, which I thought was, well, as we've already covered, we don't really understand how we approached the game.
But there wasn't, for me, for as long as there wasn't an approach. I didn't see a specific game plan we were using to try and combat, obviously, Wolves' weaknesses. And I think if you're analysing the first half, one thing that definitely didn't work in our favour was actually, although you'd think about it as a good thing, is the injury to Pedro Neto. Because the Pedro Neto injury, then Wolves then went to a back five, and obviously they brought in João Moutinho. And the thing is, I think Wolves this season, with the injuries they've got, are a lot better side with a back five, and obviously it then matches what we're playing. I think actually if they'd stuck to a back four, we probably would have had more luck, because we were creating chances. When I say that, very few, but compared to what we saw in the first half, there was that sort of 3 or 4 minute spell where obviously Ruben Loftus-Cheek had that header, which was probably one of the closest chances we had in the first half. I mean, I thought Glenn Hoddle on BT Sport commentary was being quite harsh on him, saying he has to get that on target. I think he's done well to sort of direct it in the right way, but obviously it just didn't head on goal. Then obviously there was the chance when they got whipped into the box where Anderson sort of spilled it, and then it ended up to Mitrovic, and Cody sort of cleared it off the line. But yeah, I think them moving to a back five didn't help us in any way. And then we get to the decision, which I don't want to talk about, because it's the biggest load of rubbish I've ever seen. But the VAR offside call, do you think? I don't want to go into the decision too much, because it's just, for me, it's not offside. But obviously with VAR and what's happening now, it does get that decision does get given. Do you think if that goal does stand and we go into half-time 1-0 down, do you think we see a different game at all? Or do you think Wolves would just see out that for a 1-0 victory?
Wolves would have definitely seen it out. I think that was a massive bitter blow for us because, I hate to kind of go into statistics, whatever, but Wolves are obviously better in the second half. So for us to be one of the only teams that has conceded against Wolves in the first half, that just says so much about how terrible we were defensively for that. And with the nature of the game, you never know if it's going to be offside, but regardless, like, I didn't think that was offside, so it's terrible defending for us. I don't think any of our defenders, I think Kongolo, Anderson, or was it Aina, even actually lifted off the ground. They were all rooted
Anderson
to the ground.
sort of looked behind him, realised Willian
Yeah,
Jose's
they
in the
all
air.
did.
I know he hasn't scored for Wolves yet, but Willian Jose is a good player. His record in La Liga shows he's a goal scorer for a team like Real Sociedad, who obviously won the Copa del Rey last weekend. Like, they're a good team, and he is a goal scorer. And it was just poor defending to allow him that basically a free. I know it wasn't a free header, but it's pretty much a free header inside the box. And yes, I think it's an absolutely ludicrous decision that's been given as offside. But even at the start of the second half, like, it didn't even give him a wake up call or anything, Liz. We sort of just continued on playing lackluster.
Yeah, and I think actually one of the issues was that we maybe thought, well, we got away with one there. We'll just carry on how we're going because we're not losing yet. So often we have seen Fulham look better and look more filled with urgency whenever we've been behind. And that maybe then did go in against us. And don't get me wrong, I don't want us to concede the first goal. But if you concede that goal at half-time, it instantly should change Parker's team talk. And all of a sudden, we don't have the choice to keep going how we have been. We have to make a change, and whether that's tactically or in terms of personnel. So I feel like because we got away with one there, I mean, I completely agree, Dom. It was a ridiculous decision. If footballers are going to keep throwing up decisions like this, players aren't allowed to point. We're going to basically lose crossing out of the game altogether because people are just going to have to hit from 30 yards because that's the only way they're not going to be offside.
When it comes to VAR decisions, it's up there with Bamford's goal against Palace, which still lives in my head rent free. I won't like he's about 2 yards behind. Like, I don't want to sound like your actual father here, but it's like he is. Like, it's not football if that's offside. Like, his body is behind Kongolo. Someone said that if Tosin was playing, that his bicep would actually have played Podence on side for that goal. But it's absolutely ludicrous that can possibly be offside. But I don't want to get too drawn into that individual decision because. Although
I think you already have, Dom.
I know I have. But it's just so furious.
Do you know what, though?
In football.
I actually felt a bit like Peter Crouch was livid at halftime, and I'm thinking it's because every single goal that man scored would have been offside because he's so long, and players can't help that. As you say, there's no point going into it that much because at the end of the day, the goal wasn't given. It didn't matter in the outcome of the game. The problem with us tonight was that we didn't go with any sort of game plan that was actually going to help us. We had no urgency and we had no gel. We didn't have someone who could connect play. And what it resulted in is a lot of crap crosses into the box that Mitrovic couldn't get anywhere near because they were behind him. And unfortunately, it's, Traore has scored an absolute worldie in the dying seconds. Now, 1 point as opposed to no points, it's really not going to make that much of a difference at the minute in the sense that we still have that Newcastle game. As long as we're 3 points within them, there is a chance. But I'm just frustrated at the whole lack of game plan and lack of urgency. That's what I'm annoyed about.
Yeah, and so if we look at it, obviously we went back to a back five today after a sustained sort of period of utilising a back four. Do you think we should have changed it up at half time, gone back to a back four, because that seems to have, we've been in game, you know, apart from us collapsing in the last 15 minutes against Villa, we were perfectly in that game. Obviously, we took the 1-0 lead, and I personally felt that although we defensively we looked sound, the back five was just stifling any form of sort of counter attack that we were trying to sort of create.
Yeah, that's exactly what a back five does. It either kind of invites loads of pressure, or like you say, kind of just stifles any kind of creativity, pace, and yeah, any sort of injection of any kind of chances up front. But also, I did feel possibly this game was, I didn't expect a back five, and I didn't expect to drop Congolo, but I did feel maybe it was a time that we did need to eliminate some of these uncharacteristic defensive errors that had been cropping up in the games before, which have just shown that we haven't been playing good enough. I know it sounds really basic, but yeah, very uncharacteristic errors. And I did think there was a time to make a change. I wasn't really calling for us to maybe rotate, but yeah, I just felt like maybe that I understood why Scott initially did it. But yeah, at a half time, I would have gone back to a back four, to be honest, because it required Scott reacting, and he did react. But again, I didn't really make much sense of it, as I usually do with his changes.
Yeah, you speak about his changes. Obviously, the first one he made was Anguissa in for Loftus-Cheek, and I mean, within 5 seconds, Anguissa basically did more than Loftus-Cheek did in his position for the entire 60, 70 minutes he's on the pitch. I know he had the header in the first half, but that was really all I saw from him. Anguissa, obviously, he beat a few players and got into the box, obviously, and then we won a corner from that. But again, we had a fair few corners today, and the delivery from Harrison Reed on them was poor. You know, there was many that didn't beat the first man, and you know, although we've got everyone. If you listen to any commentary of a Fulham game, they're like, "Oh, Fulham have got a really tall side with the likes of, you know, Anguissa, Loftus-Cheek, Mitrovic, Anderson, Congolo," but like we've had the toss in Matt Ritchie own goal at Newcastle, and then maybe one other one, which I think was an own goal as well. Like we don't utilize our height in the box at all, and I just didn't understand the changes. I understand the players getting these sort of players on the pitch, like Anguissa, Maja, and Cavers we saw, but there didn't look to be any tactical plan with it. It looked like, right, he's an attacker, he can maybe score goals, get him on the pitch. There didn't seem to be an adaptation of the system we were using to create a system that could have, you know, changed things up, Liz. It sort of just seemed a bit of, right, put you on, hopefully you do something.
Yeah, I mean, look, it reminded me of FIFA, Scott, from the Championship last season, when it was just like, let's get every attacking player we have on the pitch and hope for the best. And I kind of thought Scott had evolved out of that and always had a game plan, even if we couldn't really understand it. But today kind of reeked of that. And what I think is happening is that we're getting a bit desperate. That's honestly what I thought, that team today, especially you know how we saw them react at the end. I mean, I think Lamina was in tears. It looks like the weight of the world is on their shoulders, and they're not embracing the challenge the way they were maybe 6 or 7 games ago. Whenever we went on a brilliant run, we were playing really well. We pulled ourselves massively back into it. But now we haven't won in 4. Well, it's not that we even haven't won in 4 games. We've lost 4 in a row against the teams, you know, the last 3 in particular, against teams who probably have nothing to play for. They're the ones that we should be bringing the game to them, and unfortunately, we haven't done that.
No, we haven't, and I think that when it comes to these 2 games in particular, when it comes to the Villa and Wolves games, do you think that the international break came at potentially the worst time possible for this Fulham side? We were sort of, I understand we had 2 defeats previous to that, but it sort of seemed to stifle everything. And now we've come back and we've seen back to that luster team we saw at sort of in the February sort of time.
Yeah, we're getting this horrible kind of whiff of what we used to be like, and that's just simply not good enough, basically. I don't think we can use the international break as an excuse. I think a lot of players that really unexpectedly are just a yard off. Like, honestly, I'm a lot of people might disagree with me, but I do feel like players possibly like Harrison Reed even just are looking a slight pace different than they were before the international break, and obviously it wouldn't really affect him that much. But But yeah, and it's really worrying because I keep harping back onto it, but the fact that we just don't look good enough, and I think, like Liz said, we do look a bit desperate. It does look like the game management from Scott is really poor, and it is desperate. And I don't understand some of the changes. Yes, he is reacting when he should be at times earlier than he was, but it still just doesn't make sense. And I think that's really worrying for fans because it's sort of like we love Scott Parker, but he's not getting the best maybe out of these players, but also are they really getting the best out of themselves at the moment? So it's almost looks like we're just nosediving towards relegation, which is really, really painful after games like this because we feel a bit kind of clueless. I don't know.
Yeah, I think one of the most painful things if we do end up going down is that it feels like the promotion and this season would have kind of like never happened as such, because obviously the last game before lockdown was the away game at Bristol City where we drew 1-1, 12:30 p.m. on Sky Sports, and obviously then we'll come back, and if the roadmap all goes ahead, the first game of the season in the EFL will be with fans and 100% capacity, away fans with the normal allocation back to normal, but it will kind of feel like it didn't kind of happen, which is so frustrating. But I mean, we haven't really spoke much about the Wolves goal. I mean, there's not really too much to say about it. It's sort of it's the last minute of the game. Fulham have put as much as they can into it as much as the players believe they can into it, and then Traore pings it in with always might into the near post. And I think it just summarised Fulham's day that offside goal, William Jose hasn't scored a goal all season, and Traore scoring who's had about one goal contribution all season, but. I mean, some people were saying Areola can do better there. I mean, I don't think it really matters, if I'm being perfectly honest. It's the last minute of the game. Fulham have essentially tried all they can to get back into the game in the dying embers. It doesn't happen. But, Lids, where do you think this leaves this squad? And where do you think this leaves Scott Parker now?
Well, I think the problem is the next two games are games where we really shouldn't be winning. Of course, we can try, but we're playing Arsenal next week and Chelsea, I think, the week after that or 2 weeks after that. I think what happens now is that Scott has to figure out whether he's going to stick or twist in terms of some of the people maybe he's stuck by all season. And I'm not calling for like wholesale changes next week because that wouldn't help. And let's be honest, we don't have the depth to even bother doing that. But what I would say is that this squad need to kind of look at themselves and think, what do we have? Six games left now? Do we really want to go out with an absolute whimper the way not only did we do in 2019, but are we going to do that after such a good...
Well, to be fair, in 2018, 2019, we
played really well.
We played really well in the last sort of 6-7 games.
Well, but we were already...
The crazy thing is we could genuinely end up winning more games in that season than we did.
I know.
I think we won
ridiculous.
Was it 7 games? I think we won, albeit about 4 or 5 of them came under Scott Parker in the last sort of 2 or 3 months of the season. I think Parker came first game was the Chelsea game in I think that was March time. But it could be, if we don't win another game for the rest of the season, it could be ridiculous that we win more Premier League games in that season than we do in this season. Like Mitrovic got 13 Premier League goals that season, and he's only got 3 this season.
Yeah.
So he got two against Leeds and got 1 against Villa. So it's ridiculous. And I mean, I know we usually do full time for 30-40 minutes, but I don't think the Fulham fans need to be put through 30-40 minutes of us dissecting a game where it's not like it was a 3-2 loss or a 2-1 loss, where it's end-to-end stuff. Today, for me, and my final words on this, is we were simply just not good enough today. And we didn't look like scoring a goal. Realistically,
I feel like we're at a funeral or something.
No, but we didn't deserve anything from the game today. Didn't. The most we deserved from the game today was a 0-0. Like that's the most we deserve from the game today. So I think it is like it depends what you want. Like you either put all hope on Burnley beating Newcastle tomorrow, or if Newcastle win tomorrow, we essentially just get put out of our misery. because for
I
me,
just don't have any hope left. Like, this is depressing. Like, I don't know. I always have so much hope, and I just need to break up with Fulham now. Like, I'm done with you. Like, I just need a break for my sanity. Like, so many times I'm so close to just being like done. Like, that's it. And then they give me this little glimmer of hope, and I'm like, oh, well, come back.
I think a lot of the things to do when it comes to a lot of people, I think a lot of people without just when it comes to the attachment to the club at the moment is not being able to go to a game in over a year now. That honestly, it really doesn't help. It's not just going to the cottage each week but it's seeing the same faces each week. It's the whole routine element of it that, you know, you've got a Craven Cottage game at 3 p.m. on a Saturday, or you've got, I don't know, Holloway on a Saturday the week coming, and you know what train you're on or whatever. I just think there's so much and I think a lot of fans of different clubs will feel this, that there's so much detachment from not just your club but from football at the moment, because there's so much football on TV, it's a joke. Like it's on every night. It was weird during international break when there was like a night where there wasn't any. I think it was the Monday night where there wasn't any football on, which was crazy. Even on the Tuesday night, I think the only game of note was the Wales Czech Republic game. But I think, and then as soon as this season finishes, as much as I'm looking forward to it, we've got the Euros coming up. Like, it's not like there is a time where there isn't going to be any football on, but I hope that we are back in full stadium next season. I hope there is fans on the final day against Newcastle, whether we're already down or not. I think just getting back to the cottage will do a lot of people a lot of good, just to reconnect with the club, because I think that's what a lot of people have been missing this season, is just there isn't that same connection with football, and there isn't that same connection with the club. But I think that is where we should end this full-time live on.
Yeah,
because
that was quite deep. Like, I was really, I was resonating with that a lot. I was like, yeah,
I think that's because, as I said, I know we usually do a lot longer than this, but you guys don't want to hear us rambling on about how poor Fulham were today. But so all I've got to say is thank you to my guests, which has been Lydia Campbell.
Thanks, guys.
And Izzy Barker.
Thanks, everyone, for listening, even though it's painful.
Yeah. Well, it's been Fulhamish Full-Time Live on the Twitter account, Facebook page, and YouTube channel. I've been Don Betts. I'll see you guys next time. You Whites.